CBT Nuggets JNCIA Series, User Interface Options Part 2, Configuration Mode. Man, this is the stuff. This is the meat and potatoes that as we get into Nugget Lab and we start our job, we need to really be able to master this particular aspect of Juno's configuration. So we're going to start out here first of all connecting with Telnet, which is something different. We haven't done that yet. Then we'll explore some basic configuration mode activities. We're going to focus on set commands, some of the basic things that we might have done through a configuration dialog or JWeb, but how do we do them now in the actual configuration mode of the CLI? We'll also look at two categories of commands that are essential to your ongoing success as a Junos operator. When you get in there to Nugget Lab, you want to make sure that you have a good handle on how to use commit commands and their options, as well as rollback commands. That's what we're going to focus on in this Nugget. You ready? Sound good? Okay, let's dive in. Okay, so when you get into Nugget Lab, you're probably going to have several options for accessing your equipment. We've already looked at a couple of these options already in previous Nuggets. We looked at the web-based option through JWeb, and we accessed our router that way. We also looked at TeraTerm going through the console session. In my case, going through an access server, but you might be connecting directly to the console port on a device. What I'm looking at here is Poderosa, and this is just one of your many options for accessing a device through Telnet or Secure Shell. So let's go ahead and use a different option for accessing, let's say, my 2320 router. And we know that the 2320 from earlier in this Nugget series is being managed on interface gigabit 000, gig E000 at address 192.168.3.5. So I'll go up here to File, do a new Telnet / Secure Shell session. I could do Secure Shell 1, Secure Shell 2. I'm on a network that is basically isolated, so I'm going to go ahead and choose to use the Telnet option. So I'll put in the IP address of the host, click on OK. It's now going to ask me for a login, and I've been logging in over the last few Nuggets as the root user. What we're going to look at right off the bat here as we explore the configuration mode is one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to create obviously a root authentication for your root user, but then you want to create a super user. And this is really a philosophy that we use all through the industry. You create a super user and then you log in as that super user as opposed to the root user. And that super user has, the highest level access you can have as far as configuration goes. So I've created a user, a super user called M. Shannon. So I'm going to go ahead and log in through Telnet as that user and put in my credentials. And here we are. So now I can go up here, I can clear the screen. And just like TeraTerm, I'm operating. Now I'm using Telnet protocol or terminal emulation protocol to manage this device. Now when I first come in, you can see I'm in operational mode. Well, as you remember, to get into configuration mode, I can either type in configure, or that'll get me there, or I can type in edit. That'll get me there. And so I'm in entering configuration mode, and you can see I'm at this prompt. Now, something that we didn't talk about in the previous Nuggets, I wanted to focus on configuration mode here. And you want to remember this when you get on the job there at Nugget Lab, is that if I want to run a command that's an operational mode command, but I'm at the configuration mode prompt, I can do that. I just got to put the word run in front of it. So if I say run show system chassis, right? Let's try something else. Show chassis hardware. And you can even see I can do help features on operational mode from within configuration mode by putting run in front of it. So I wanted to do hardware. So there we can see, I can see the show chassis hardware, but I'm doing this command from within configuration mode, right? So you can tell by the prompt. So put the word run in front of it, and we can do it that way. We also see that we're, in the hierarchy here of edit. Okay, we'll clean that up. Also, you can do a question mark here, and you can see a lot of commands we can run under this, the possible completions under configuration mode. Okay, very important things. Now we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about some of these things. And don't forget, we have some nuggets coming up later that are going to be configuration basics. And these configuration nuggets, a couple of them, are really going to go into pretty deep detail. Right now we're going to focus on this configuration mode, which allows us to do things like commit, which we have quite a bit to talk about with this commit here. It's a very interesting command, has lots of powerful features and possibilities. We can set, and we'll be setting a lot of things, setting a parameter. Definitely remember that the opposite of set, unlike, let's say, the Cisco IOS, which is like no set, would be delete. Okay, so we set something and we want to remove it or get rid of it, we would delete it. Okay, not always that intuitive for us. This rollback feature, we're gonna take a look at the rollback feature, very powerful feature to know about as well. We can also do some show and status stuff here as well. Okay, so let's stay in this prompt for a second. Now, when we went through the configuration dialog to configure this, and I think we did the 2320 through the JWeb, we actually changed the host name of this router to J2320. Okay, but you didn't really learn how to do that in the configuration mode. So let's go ahead and do that here. We'll say we're going to set the system, and there's a lot of stuff, by the way, you can do on setting the system. There's only 50% of it, so just a ton of things we can do. We're going to set the system host name, and all I got to do is just type in HO, and it kind of just automatically fills it in. Remember, I can autofill this. Let me go back. I can autofill this a couple of ways. I can type in just the beginning few letters and type in the tab key. That does it. That autofills it. Or I can type in the space bar. So there's only one command after set system that is the letter H. But what if I type in set system and just type in S and hit the space bar? Well, that's not enough. Okay, it needs more information to make it unique. So it's going to tell me there's other possible completions that start with the letter S. So can you be more specific? So if I put in SA, by the way, and hit space bar, it gives me saved core. It knows that much. Saved core context or saved core files, right? So that's what we're talking about here with that autofill. Very, very powerful feature that you're going to use quite a bit. So we're going to set the system and just H hostname. And what do I want to call this? Well, obviously let's change it from 2320. We know it's a J. We know it's a J series router. So let's just go ahead and call it 2320. Okay, and type that in there. And now, what you notice is I've made this change, but this change that I've made is what we call our candidate configuration. So right now what I'm working with is a candidate configuration. I'm not actually implementing any changes into the active configuration. So I'm going to just type this in here, candidate, okay? And we'll just look at that word for a second. This is one of those things that makes Junos really different than other operating systems, other network operating systems, because I'm not making any actual changes to my router, my 2320 right now. All I'm doing is working on a candidate configuration. And so I can use a variety of different commit statements as to how I want to actually commit or write this candidate to what we call the active configuration. The candidate doesn't run my device. And I could even say, you know, before I commit this, I could say, let's commit this, and let's check and make sure what I've done so far is doable, okay? It says your configuration check succeeds. So it's basically saying, you know, at any time I can look at all the changes I've made to my candidate configuration. And by the way, my candidate configuration is actually made under the context of my user, my super user M. Shannon. And that's important to realize. This is actually stored in a user folder, okay? So if you have multiple users logged in at the same time on this router, multiple users could have multiple candidate configurations. Let's make another change, because as we know right now, I'm running as this super user. So let's create a super user account for you, okay? Let's go ahead and set, and we're going to do, this is a set system command. We want to say we're going to create a system login for a user, and we'll call this user CBTN star. That's you. CBT Nugget star, okay? And we want to say we want to authenticate, or the authentication method for this user is going to be a plain text password. And you can see I'm just typing in a couple of letters. And I'll hit enter. So it wants that password for you right now. So let's say CBTN. How's that? And okay, there we go. I'm glad I did that. It needs a minimum password length of 6, and it requires a change of case, a change of digits or punctuation. So let's say capital C BTN 2012. Okay, how's that? We'll use that one. So let's do it again. I'll hit the up arrow and hit enter. Capital C BTN 2012. Better write that down, right? Capital C BTN 2012. And again, always write those down. Now let's do the commit thing here and see what some of our options are. I could say commit and quit. If I do this, it's basically going to commit this change and make it part of the active configuration, okay? And by the way, we'll talk about this rollback feature that's very cool, because if I make a couple of changes and I decide I don't like the changes, I can always roll back up to like 50 changes. So I could literally make 50 changes on this system, and then obviously I could roll back 50 different changes. It's kind of like the undo feature in a word processor like Microsoft Word. It's very cool. Now, we also know from the previous nugget that I actually saved a rescue configuration, right? So at any point, I could totally mess this thing up, and I could always go get that rescue configuration, use the request command, and add that back to my active configuration. So that's interesting. We can do commit and quit. I don't want to do that, because if I do that, it's going to quit me out of this mode. Notice you can say at, so we can schedule it. I could say, I want to go ahead and commit this at a particular time. Okay, so I might want to go do a bunch of changes to the candidate configuration during production hours and say, you know what, let's commit these changes at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning when they're going to happen on the system, or I can do them, for 6 o'clock p.m. and then I can see if there's any, drastic effects, and gives me plenty of time to fix or roll back to a previous configuration, or even use a rescue configuration, right? So I can commit that. I already mentioned commit check. This is going to say, of all the changes I've done, is there anything that I've done that's kind of out of the ordinary? Well, there we go. Check it out. There's one in here. User CBN star. There's a missing mandatory statement. So my configuration failed because I didn't configure it properly. So I should have put this user in the class super user, but I didn't do it. So let's make sure we do this properly. So we're going to say set system login fat fingering things user, and then CBTN star, right? That's you. But let's say you're in the class of super user. Okay, now what are we going to do? Now we'll do your authentication method. Authentication plain text password. Okay, that's what we wanted. We wanted to say CBTN star is in class super user, which is really the next level under root user. So there's nothing more powerful than super user than the root. And I could even come in as a super user and switch over to the root if I needed to do that for some circumstance. Okay, so there's my command. Let's hit new password, and again it was capital CBTN 2012. Alright, now let's say commit check. Good. Configuration succeeds now. So I didn't make any mistakes in my CBTN star user, and so now if I want to, I can go and look at some commit options. See how valuable this is, how important this is? You can go all along the way and you can make sure there's not any errors in your configuration. It's so awesome. I could also put a comment in here. If I put a comment in here, this is a message that's going to be written to the log. So as you go back through and you look at all your commits, you have these log entries. All right. You could even pipe this commit through some other command. Let's just go ahead and commit it now. Excellent, my commit is complete. Now, something else to know about commit is this. If you come into a brand new device like I did, the 2320, and I've made changes, I came in, let's say I came in as root, okay? I came in as root, and initially there was no password, so I just typed in root user, took me right into the root prompt where I could hit CLI and so on and so forth. Here's the deal. I could make a bunch of changes right there, right off the bat, as the root user on a new device. But if I tried to commit, it would not let me, okay? It won't let you until you set the system root authentication. So from a testing standpoint and from a real world standpoint, when you get into Nugget Lab on the job and you pull that new router up and you rack it up and you access that router, You must remember, whatever changes you make, you will not be able to commit those changes to the active configuration until you set the root authentication for the system, okay? Something besides an empty password. And of course, I've already done that, and so I would have gone in here, but you have several options, by the way, when you do this, okay? You could do an encrypted password string. You could apply that. You could say, here's a plain text password, which you could do that. It'll auto-encrypt it for you. Or you could use Secure Shell. We'll talk more about Secure Shell. This is obviously a public key method, and I would use this Poderosa here along with other tools like Secure CRT or PuTTY or others to use Secure Shell. Remember when I went File, New Connection, it asked me to do a Secure Shell connection. What happens is either an RSA key pair or a DSA key pair are generated on the router along with my management station, let's say running Poderosa, and they go through a process to allow encrypted transmissions to happen between the management station and this router using RSA key pairs or DSA key pairs. Now, you'll learn a lot more about that when you get into my security series, okay, my Juno Security. But realize we have several different options here. Now, I went ahead, when I did mine, I set my system root authentication, and I used the plain text password option, and it automatically encrypted it for me. Okay, and that's a fine option, especially if you're in a lab environment or a testing environment like I am. But remember, you've got to set that root authentication first, because until you do, it will not let you commit anything. And if I were to type in commit, by the way, and I hadn't done that, it would bark at me. It would basically tell me your root authentication is not set yet. I can't commit anything to the active configuration. Okay, let's set a couple more things here. Let's set our domain name, okay? Gosh, I'm having a hard time with that SYS, aren't I? Set system domain name, and we're going to call this Shannon.lab, okay? That's my domain. Let's also set the name of my DNS server, okay? Set system name server, and it is 192.168.2.20. Now, it's on a different network. Remember, this interface is on the 3. network. However, another interface on this router will be on the 3. network. If it's not, I have to have a routed path over to this name server. It's actually better, of course, for my router to be directly connected on one of its interfaces to this 192.168.2.0/24 network. Okay. Let's also do a set system services. Let's do a question mark. Let's do a set system services web management. How's that sound? Ah, good. Missing argument. Let's go up here and type in a question mark, see what we need. Okay, so it's saying I want to allow web management. In other words, I want to allow JWeb access for this device. Do I want to allow unencrypted access or do I want encrypted access? Okay, let's say HTTP. Excellent. Okay, let's use that very powerful pipe symbol now. Let's say I want to find out what changes I've already made during this particular candidate configuration editing session. I can do this. I can say show, and notice I'm doing a show command here in the configuration, right? So configuration mode has show commands, and so does operational mode. So I'll do the pipe symbol, and I'm going to say let's do a show, and I'm going to pipe this to the compare function. And it's going to show me, here's the things I've done, right? Since the last commit. I've changed the domain name to Shannon.lab. And of course, I've said to the name server, your DNS server is 192.168.2.20. Those are the two commands I've made. I can even say, I want to compare this to a previous configuration. So we can say show, and we'll pipe this to a compare rollback. And we'll say rollback to one change ago. Boom, there we go. And we can see rollback 1, well, we changed the host name from J2320 to 2320. We can even see back here when we edited our user CBTN star, right? There's a user ID 2001. They're of the class super user, and you can see how their password, the password I put in there, which was capital C BTN 2012, has now been encrypted, and we can't see it. All right. So, and it says after that it's secret data. Okay, you can't really see it very well, but it says it's secret data. So I'm basically using the pipe symbol to say, take the output of show here and pipe this through to the compare function, and we want to compare it against the first rollback. So that's a very, very powerful thing, and all along the way you can see kind of the process that you're at. Now, I know we're spending a lot of time with this confirm thing, but trust me, this is such a powerful feature, and it's one that, Junos experts still use. For example, there's a thing called commit confirmed, which is really a brilliant feature that Junos adds. Realizing that you have a configuration and the ability to activate all of it in one time. If I just type in commit, it's going to activate all my changes at once. Okay, but what happens if, as I'm making these changes, it starts to really affect the performance of my router, or it affects end users? Okay, what happens if my configuration actually locks me out of my router and I can't log in? Well, what you can do is you can say, I want to try out my candidate configuration. So that way, if it's not acceptable, then I'll just go back to the previous version automatically. So this is a great way to get yourself out of a pickle, right? So to try out your candidate, you're going to issue the command commit confirmed. Commit confirmed. Now, here's what's going to happen. This is going to give me a 10-minute window to configure. And if I don't commit my changes in 10 minutes, it's automatically going to roll me back. That's the default. The default is 10 minutes. But what if I want to automatically roll back, let's say, in 1 minute? Okay, so if I do 1, here's what's going to happen. Let's go ahead and do 1 just for fun, right? So if I do commit confirmed 1, in 1 minute, if I don't confirm my change, then as we can see here, going up here to the show compare, my domain name is not going to be changed to Shannon.lab, and my DNS server is not going to be 2.20, right? So let's go ahead and do that. It's going to say, check it out, commit confirmed, you automatically roll back in 1 minute unless you confirmed. Okay, so I have basically now 50 seconds to issue the confirm command or confirm and quit. So I don't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to let it roll back. So let me pause this and you'll see what happens when I do not roll back. Okay, check it out. Commit confirm will be rolled back. Broadcast message from 2320, commit was not confirmed. Automatic rollback complete. So it automatically rolled back, and it basically no longer has these two changes in my candidate configuration. Isn't that just an awesome feature? I know you people out there that are Cisco people are looking at all these things I can do with this commit command and are going, man, that is some awesome stuff. I wish we had that. This is some great stuff, and it's very powerful, and it's things that you need to know right off the bat when you walk in and get on those routers at Nugget Lab, because you know what, you might make some mistakes, but having this little backup feature, because you can do more than 10 minutes, and you know that you can just play around on those production routers at Nugget Lab, and if something doesn't go right, don't worry about it. Unless you confirm it, it's going to automatically roll back. So that's a great feature. And by the way, this is just not a novice thing. Experienced Junos operators and engineers still get in the habit of doing commit confirmed, and they just get used to that 10-minute or 5-minute window, however they configure it. Now 1 minute is a little bit overboard, but I wanted to do that just so you could see the results of when I didn't commit my changes. Now, by the way, we can do a show command in operational mode to see our configuration. We can also do a show command in configuration mode to see our configuration. And there we go. We can see the things that have been done in our configuration here. Okay. Should look familiar to us. And there's, of course, all of our interfaces. Here's gigabit 000 or GigE 000. You can see management, and there's our IP address. Now, I know you're probably really excited about getting in and configuring a bunch of interfaces and routing these devices together, but trust me, I am building a foundation for you. So I don't want any gaps in your knowledge. So when you walk into Nugget Lab, you're going to be totally prepared, not just for that job, but also for the next exam, right? That's the goal. Let's do a Control-C here. And I'm going to go ahead and get back up to the top. Now, we talked about rollback, okay? If you just do the rollback, and I already kind of, tease you with this rollback feature. This is archiving the last 50 active configurations. It's kind of like that undo feature, right? So you can do a rollback and question mark, and it's going to show me my up to 11 possible rollbacks. And you can see here what we have. We have 11 possible rollbacks, and even here's the one that was a commit confirmed, and it said it was rolled back. So we have up to 11. Okay, then what do we have after that? There's our rescue configuration. Okay, and this was done yesterday, right? Because you were with me in the previous nugget. I did this yesterday on February 11th, and you can see here's when we created our rescue configuration. So I have the ability to pull up the rescue configuration, or I can roll back a particular number of changes. You know, roll back 1, roll back 2, and roll back 3, or so on and so forth. So I can move back some of these changes that were done via the CLI, some of these changes that were done via JunoScript. And again, the more I work on this router, the more changes I make to the active configuration, and the more commits I do, obviously the more archives I have. And like I said, I can roll back up to the 50th change. Very powerful. Let me tell you why I'm not really digging into interfaces right now. In the next nugget, okay, this is going to be what we call our Juno software fundamentals. And in the next nugget, I'm going to get out of the CLI for the most part. I'm going to be talking about the architecture and the software, the Juno software. When I get there, I want to talk about the interfaces, because the interfaces really are software constructs. Yes, we know we have these physical ports on the router and the switch, but the interfaces we can create are really these logical components. So when I talk about the Juno software and architecture, I'm going to really explain the underlying interface features, among other things. That way, when we come in to configure our interfaces, I won't have to really explain it on the fly. You'll understand the underlying architecture. Fair enough? Okay, I paused for a second and went in and made 3 more changes. Again, I had undone my domain name and my name server. I made 3 more changes. I set the domain name to Shannon.lab. I set my DNS server to this IP address, and I reset my hostname back to J2320. As you can see, this change was committed, so I was operating with the name hostname 2320. Okay, so I made those changes. Check this out. Let's say I want to commit at a future time. So 11:45 p.m. is going to be 23:45 for me, right? Now I could also do the date. So if I wanted to do it, you know, at a later date, I could put in quotes, let's say 2012 2/14, which is, you know, Happy Valentine's Day, and then the time. But I'm going to put commit at 23:45. Okay, so it says this. Look, there was, first of all, there was a configuration check, and that's the first thing it does, and it succeeded. So there was no problems with my candidate configuration. It's going to execute this on February 13th, 2012, 15 minutes before Valentine's Day. Okay, it's been changed but not committed. It'll be committed then. Okay, so I cleared that out. Let's do a run, which means I'm going to do an operational command, show system users. That's a good one. And I can see that I've got, here's user M. Shannon, and from 3.10, which is this management station, and you can see logged in at 7:20 p.m. So it's been about, almost an hour, and I'm on the CLI. Now, check this out. More than one person, like I mentioned, can log into the router and make changes at, simultaneously. What if, and this is important to know from the exam, as a matter of fact, all the stuff in this nugget's exam worthy, okay? What if I wanted to get into configuration mode, but I wanted to be exclusively configuring? I want to keep somebody from overriding my configuration changes. Well, if I exit back up to operational mode, I can actually say I want to configure, and I have an option to say I want to configure exclusive. Interesting, huh? I can even say I want to configure privately, to work in a private database. All right, so I don't see what else is going on. So I could say configure exclusive, and it says the configuration database was locked by M. Shannon. And there's also a scheduled commit. Okay, as we know, there's a commit scheduled for 11:45 at night. Let's say I want to clear that. I can do clear. Oh, let's go back. Actually, let's run need to do an operational mode. I can either exit or go up, run, clear, commit, or clear system. There we go. So I have no more pending 1145 commit. Let's also go and take a look at the rollback here. And I've got one from right when we started at 1. So my rescue was at 211. Let's go back and roll back 8 and see how that works. Rollback complete. We'll do commit and quit. Okay, so here's what I did. I was logged in as M. Shannon, correct? And that was a user, a super user that I created during the last few commits on my active configuration. So when I said I want to roll back to, let's say, rollback 8, what I did was I actually rolled back, and I did this on purpose, to a archived configuration before I created the super user M. Shannon, right? So what happens if you create a user and then you're logged in as that user and then you roll back your configuration to a point before that user was created? Well, you're basically locked out of the router. Now, I was on a telnet session, so what did I do? It's easy. You just simply come in and you CLI into the router. So that's what I did. Now I'm in TerraTerm and I use the command line interface. And now I'm back in as root user, and I can go in and recreate that user, for example, that super user, or the CBTN star user, as a matter of fact, because that user doesn't exist anymore either, right? Remember, when I do rollback, and I rolled back earlier to 8. If you roll back too far and you have to come back in as the root user like I did, I can roll back to a more recent archive. Or I could say, let's just go ahead and roll back all the way to rescue, which is the rescue configuration, right? And that's the one that I showed you how to create in operational mode in the previous nugget. Remember, in operational mode, it was request, system, configuration, rescue, saved. So I can always roll back to that rescue configuration if I want to. Or like I said, if I roll back too far, just come back in as root and roll back to a more recent configuration. Okay? So these are very powerful skills, my friend, that you need to know when you get in there to Nugget Lab and you're starting out on that router. Now you have a pretty handy set of tools at operational mode. You've got a pretty handy set of tools at configuration mode, right? So now what we're going to do is, in the next nugget, we will start to look at the software and architecture of Juno. So we're going to take a sidebar and take some time out of the CLI, okay, and kind of understand and get a solid foundation into Junos and the architecture. And then, after that sidebar nugget, we'll come back into configuring our router, and we're going to get into a lot more elaborate configurations, including some of the most important things, which are dealing with configuring the interfaces so that we have our interfaces going so that we're ready to start to do what routers do, right? And communicate with other routers and dynamic routing protocols and all those wonderful things like routing policy and class of service. So that's our approach, and excellent job in this nugget. Let's see what we covered. Okay, my friends, you are one giant step closer to walking into Nugget Lab, starting that new job with a whole ton of confidence. In part 2 of User Interface Options, we looked at configuration mode. First of all, we connected with Telnet. Of course, we've already connected through the JWeb. We've already connected through the CLI. Let's try Telnet. I used Poderosa. Then we explored configuration mode. And of course, we're going to be in configuration mode a ton more throughout this entire JNCIA Nugget series. We focused on some basic set commands, the power of commit commands, and let me get that in there, boom, the power of rollback commands. Well, I hope this CBT Nugget was informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. Catch you later.